Hey, what's up, my friends? Grant Baldwin here. Welcome back to the Speaker Lab podcast. Glad you're here. Glad you're joining us here on episode 236. Got a great show for you today. Before we get to that point, hey, I know I've mentioned this to you before, but we actually have a brand new program that is called Booked and Paid to Speak Elite. And so if you are looking for my personal help to help you build and grow your speaking business, you want to talk to our team about that, about what that would look like to work with you, help you build your website, help you build your demo video, help you get specific leads for you and your speaking business, then you definitely want to reach out. We'd love to talk to you. You can go to thespeakerlab.com/apply. Again, that is thespeakerlab.com/apply. You can apply for a spot to breakthrough session to talk with our team, and we'd love to chat with you and learn a little bit more about what you're looking for and how we can help you out. So again, check out that by going over to thespeakerlab.com/apply. All right, so today we are going to be getting into a fun conversation, a different conversation. This is a conversation with my friend Jane Atkinson, and Jane is the founder of speakerlauncher.com. Definitely check her out. Check out her book, The Wealthy Speaker 2.0, which is a phenomenal book that I highly recommend and highly encourage you to pick up as a speaker. And so Jane does a lot of coaching. She's been in the industry for a long time. What we're actually planning on doing is she was planning on interviewing me. I was planning on interviewing her for each other's podcast. And we were like, you know what if we just did one kind of joint podcast episode? And so that's what this is. So this same episode is going to appearing on her podcast as well as here on this podcast. So if you're coming over from Jane's show, welcome. We're glad that you're here. And whoever you are, wherever you're at, we're glad that you're hanging out with us today. So let's get right into it. We're going to be talking all about things that nobody tells you about the speaking industry and speaking business. So a lot to cover, great wide range of conversation. I think you're going to get a lot from today. So let's jump right in. Here's my conversation with Jane Atkinson. Enjoy. Hey, what's up, friends? Grant here today, joined by my friend, Miss Jane Atkinson. And we've been discussing, like, all right, I want to interview her. She wants to chat with me. And so we may just do a little fireside chat here. I don't have a fireplace at the moment here, at least in my office.
I do. You want me to turn mine on? It's actually pretty warm here, but I could turn it on just in case.
You're up in Toronto. Is it still cold there?
We're starting to come around. We're seeing the robins and we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel now.
Okay.
Thank goodness.
All right. Very good. Very good.
Long winter.
So Jane, you've been in the industry for a long time. One thing I'm curious to just know a little bit more. We crossed paths. I went through one of your programs several years ago when I was doing a lot of speaking. It was,
which one?
You had one for I don't remember.
Maybe the Nashville chapter or something like that?
Nope, it was something else. Okay. It's been probably, 5-6 years ago, something like maybe.
Might have been one of the first renditions of like my online course or something like that. Okay. I knew that we knew each other. I just couldn't remember exactly how, and my Infusionsoft notes don't go back that far. So I wasn't sure.
So you've been in the industry for a long time, and you played a lot of different roles. Can you kind of talk us through your journey? Like, how did you first get into the speaking world?
Sure. So I fell into it just like all of you. Didn't know what I was going to do, 25 years old. And I heard a Les Brown tape, or watched it over and over again, PBS special. And I thought, that's it. I'm going to go work for a motivational speaker. And so wrote Les this great letter, and they sent me back like an order form for his products or something like that, which we laughed about later on. But that was it. Just planting the seed was probably just a matter of weeks later. I was kind of coming to the end of a temp position with 3M Canada, and I ended up getting a gig as a marketing manager for my very first motivational speaker. And so that was the first 15 years of my career, was as an agent, someone who was behind the scenes selling the speaker. Mm-hmm. And I went out to Vancouver, represented Peter Legge after that, got recruited down to Dallas to work with Vicente, and he gave me the luxury of working under the roof of a speakers bureau as well, because his wife owned a bureau. And so that 6 years under the roof of the bureau also gave me a massive bird's eye view into the industry. And so about years kind of 3 and 4 of working with Vince, people started to ask me, how did you make Vince so successful? How did you make Peter Legge so successful? And I thought to myself, maybe I might start charging for that at some point in time. But I did go on and work for the Bureau for 2 years as well. I managed their exclusives division. We had some celebrities and some best-selling authors and people like that. And it was after 9/11, I decided to come back to Canada, and I hung out the shingle as a coach. And for 15 years, I've been writing books and coaching speakers and running classes on how to get booked more quickly.
I like it. One of the things I'm curious about is I get this question a lot, and I'm sure you do as well, and especially since you have a lot more experience on that side of it. But when people come and say, Grant, how do I find a bureau or how do I find an agent? And I've got my answer. I'm curious what you
I'd
say.
love to hear your answer, because my answer is that's one of the most difficult finds in the industry. And I actually did a podcast just on how to find an agent. It's a marriage, that relationship between myself and Peter, or myself and Vince and Betska, who was my first speaker. It's such a hard thing to find. And I've seen a lot of people try it and not successfully hire. People want to throw money at the problem. And the problem is that they can't sell themselves, or they don't have the time to sell themselves. Those are kind of two different problems. If you don't have the time, what I recommend people do is farm out all of the other stuff and just keep the sales in your backyard. Like, get somebody to do all the research end of things for you and come back to you with the list of who you might want to reach out to, that type of thing. I think when people lose control of the sales process, sometimes that can be a little bit tricky in this business. What do you think?
I like to shoot people down on this. So what I tend to find is that people are asking, generally there's a point in someone's, I think, speaking career where it makes sense to start looking for an agent or looking for a bureau, right? Where you get to a point where the demand exceeds the supply. And by all means, like, you should focus on the thing that only you can do and have other people that can help with other parts of that. I find that for a lot of, especially newer speakers, they immediately start going, how do I get in with a bureau, or how do I get in with an agent? And so the thing that I oftentimes tell them is that if you can't book yourself, a bureau or an agent's not going to be interested in booking you. And so I think, and I get it, like, whenever I got started as a speaker, you don't know what you don't know. And so I think sometimes outside looking in, you assume that a bureau and agent has a massive amount of gigs and not enough speakers to fill. If only we had more speakers, we could fill it. And it's just like a complete opposite.
That is not true.
Not at all. And so a bureau or a speaker who says, even if I can just get on a bureau site. And so helping a speaker to understand getting on a bureau site typically means absolutely nothing. And it's a nice little feather in the cap, and it feels good, but it rarely, if ever, translates to any business. And you are one of hundreds, if not thousands, of speakers on a bureau site.
We do tell the same thing. I will say, go and launch your business first. Definitely an agent or a bureau is not going to launch you. You need to really be off the ground first. Why don't we do, for the purpose of my listeners, share with me your journey of how you came to be where you are today?
Yeah. So my career actually started as a youth pastor. So I got to do a lot of speaking in that space, was speaking to a lot of students, really enjoyed it. Parts of it I liked, parts of it I didn't like. And I met a couple of guys who are full-time speakers. Actually, to take a step back, in college, I worked for a guy who was a full-time speaker. And so got to see a little bit of that back end side of helping him with logistics and travel and invoices and contracts, and just all of that just goes into that side of it. Then I was doing some speaking as a youth pastor, really liked it, wanted to do more of it, met a couple full-time speakers. And I think, like a lot of speakers, didn't necessarily realize, like, this is a thing, or this is a thing.
This is a business.
Totally. Absolutely. Right.
Go figure.
And so I started understanding and learning and understanding kind of how that world worked in terms of just marketing yourself as a speaker, and not looking for a bureau, not looking for an agent, and just understanding, okay, how do I actually go out and find business and not be dependent on someone else? And so we did that. I was a full-time speaker for about 8-9 years or so, and still do a few speaking gigs here and there.
What topic did you mostly speak on, Grant?
I did a lot, primarily, especially early on, with students, a lot with high school, a lot with college students. And then recently I've done a lot more with corporations and entrepreneurs. I did a big pharmaceutical group a couple weeks ago.
And what topic?
With students is a lot more motivation. And so a lot of motivation, a lot of helping students think through career choices and think through what they wanted to do, beyond high school, beyond college. So that's a big thing I did for several years. And then with with a lot of the corporate audiences I speak to now, it's more along the lines of like work-life balance. And so we do a talk called Who You Are is More Important Than What You Do. And so that's one that we've done a lot of lately. And so I was probably in kind of a similar spot to you almost, where I was speaking. My busiest year, I did about 70 gigs, and I really, really liked it. The challenge of speaking is it doesn't scale very well. You're one person in one place at one time speaking to one audience, and the 45 or 60 minutes you're on stage is amazing. But the nature of that is I have to get on a plane and I have to leave my family. And just a couple weeks ago, this pharmaceutical group I spoke to, I was supposed to fly in, speak once, fly home, be gone one night, and collect a good check and kind of end a transaction. Well, there's a blizzard that hit Colorado Springs at that time, so I ended up being stuck for a couple days. So I spoke one time for an hour, but I ended up being there for 3 nights. And it's just, you're just trapped and there's nothing you can do. And it's just as speakers understand that, like, that's the glamorous side of the job that nobody sees. You know, you're trapped in a hotel in a blizzard and there's nothing you can do about it and you can't get home, you know? And so I got to that point where it's just like, okay, I don't necessarily want to be doing more gigs. And I felt like I was on the upper limit of what I wanted to charge in that market and in that space. And at the time, just had a lot of people who were asking like, hey, I want to do this. I want to be a speaker. And some who would say, I want to do 70, 100 gigs a year. And some who would say, I have a good thing going, but I would love to do 5 or 10. And I just have no idea. How do you find those 5 or 10? You know, who do you speak to? Who do you speak about? How much do you charge? Like, how does this world work? And I really like
it. It is. The whole world is a bit of a mystery.
It is.
Most of our friends and family don't really understand it, right? They're really all secretly hoping we'll go get a real job someday.
Mom, actually, I get paid really well to do this.
I'm joking. I'm joking. My husband gets it. He's like, okay, you go, girl. Like I'm hoping he'll be able to retire before me, and then we can really be mobile.
That
would be the coolest. But you're so right. You know, you have a finite amount of inventory on your calendar. And so I see why you might have decided to branch off into this other world, because now you can do more from your desk, you can do more at home, you can bring people to you, you can do all kinds of fun things.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the unique things about the speaking industry in general is there's no right or wrong way to do it. You know, you and I have been around for a long time, and we know a lot of speakers who do it vastly different ways, and they both work. So some speakers who only speak a couple of times a year, and maybe they sell some type of online training program or coaching or high-end consulting, and some that do. I'm thinking of a Canadian friend, Scott Stratton, who only does keynotes, and I don't want to coach, I don't want to consult, I don't want to do workshops. All I want to do is keynotes, and they both work. Like, that's fine, you know? So there's not necessarily a one size fits all. I personally I really like doing like 60 minutes. I'm really good in that setting, but doing like a 3-day workshop for 20 people, that just sounds miserable to me. But there's people that love that. You know, they don't want to do a big keynote. They would much rather work with a smaller group for a longer period of time. And again, both are acceptable, both work. So it's not necessarily like you have to do it a certain way in order for it to work or make sense or fit within the industry.
Right. What were some of your early... So you went to work for the speaker on the back end and probably learned a lot from that speaker, just as I did from my first speaker, Betska K. Burr. And back then we were doing Tom Winninger's Book It tapes, Book It 1 and Book It 1 and Book It 2. Tapes, I know, like an audio series where you folded out the thing. So frightening. Anyway, I really learned the business from her and how it's just such a numbers game.
It is.
Was that kind of a big part of your learning with that first speaker that you went to work for?
So the speaker that I worked with, I think one of the biggest takeaways I had from him was how much of a relationship business this was. So he had been speaking for, I don't know, probably 15, 20 years or something. And a high percentage of his business was repeat, was referral, was word of mouth. And, you know, as you well know, speaking is very much a momentum business. And it can be a little bit hard to get the wheel going. But once you get the wheel going, then you start getting business that is difficult to replicate or duplicate. Of someone was a friend of someone who saw you in an audience 3 years ago, and you can't reverse engineer that. But the more you're speaking, the more that starts to happen, you know? And so I found that a lot of his business just came from repeat and word of mouth and referral business.
So he was good. What you're saying is he was good. And if, for those of you who are listening, if you're not getting 2 to 3 at least from every gig, and there's going to be the odd gig where there isn't any spinoff to come, then you have to look at the presentation. You
Right.
have to look at whether or not the presentation is doing the job, don't you think?
Well, the presentation side, but then also just making sure it's the right audience. So, and in terms of who you're speaking to and being aware of that. So if part of the goal is, okay, I would like to be doing, 50, 60, 70, 100 gigs a year, then making sure that you're strategic on the audiences that you're speaking to. Are there potential decision makers that are in the audience there? Are the people that you're speaking to, do you want to do more audiences like that? And if it's way outside, every speaker takes some random ones here and there just to kind of fill in the calendar. But if the majority of your calendar is filled with people like, I don't really want to speak to them, but they're going to pay well, like it's just hard to build a business on that. But making sure that you're strategic about who you're speaking to, and also just in terms of how you're speaking, I have found that there's a lot of audiences that just there's like a disconnect that they think you're just a random. You're not even necessarily a speaker. You're just someone who happened to be like locally who was available to come give a chat.
Yeah.
And there's a disconnect like, no, actually I do this. Like this is a full-time career, It's like, oh really? Okay, yeah, I can see how you could come to our company and do this, or you could come to our event or organization or whatever and do this. And so helping an audience to connect the dots so that they get there in their mind of like, oh, that'd be amazing if he or she could come do this for our audience, for our event or conference or group or whatever it may be. So I think that with him, especially early on, that was a big takeaway from me. Now, when I started my own career, I was very much a numbers game because at that point, like I'm brand new, like I think a lot of times like speakers assume, and I'd be curious on your thoughts on this, like I'm a white guy from the Midwest. And so it's not like I'm not a professional skier. I haven't climbed Mount Kilimanjaro blindfolded in shorts. Like there's nothing that I can point to say like, I landed a plane in the Hudson. Isn't that cool?
I'm
like
special. Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't survived cancer. Like it's a pretty normal average life. So I don't have some crazy story that gets my foot in the door. So a lot of it for me in terms of just differentiation was coming down to being really, really, really good on stage and also being really, really good to work with. And my guess is like you found that to be true, that if you're amazing on stage, but you're a pain in the butt to work with. And by pain in the butt, I don't necessarily mean like prima donna or a diva, but just like you're unorganized, you're sloppy, you don't follow up, they email you needing a contract signed and it takes you 2 weeks to get back with them and they got to follow up with you. Like event organizers don't want to work with speakers like that, So we found that like the easier we could be to work with, then more organizers and event planners would want to work with us.
You know what? Having run my own events, it's really interesting to see so I teach my clients speed. Okay, so if somebody emails you a date and wants to know if you're available, boom, you should be back to them 24 hours and let them know.
Yeah.
Even if you're on a plane, I'm on a plane, but I'll be right back to you, that kind of thing when I land. It's interesting what I've noticed is those who are slow to get back to me about the date are going to be slow on everything.
Right.
And so that's what you mean when you say sloppy. They don't have their systems down and they're not very professional about it. And there's a lot of ways to just technology can help us just take a lot of that right out of the equation and really turn the business into systems.
Right.
And because it's very difficult to grow. You cannot even do 100 gigs a year if you're unorganized.
Yep.
But yeah, I would say speed and being a prima donna to work with, also a big no-no. Going over your time on stage, you can blow the audience's doors off. But if you go 10 minutes over and mess up the rest of their day, nobody's going to forget that. That's what the meeting planner will remember, not all of the other glory things. And so really be aware of their time and where you fit as a tiny little cog in the big giant wheel that is their meeting. Hey, let's talk about, because you speak about work-life balance. What do you think the magic number is in terms of maximum for having a solid home life as a speaker? You said 100. I think 100 is ridiculous. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, my busiest year, I did 70.
How did that feel?
Manageable, but it's still a lot,
Yeah.
The other thing I think that speakers have to realize and remember is that it can be very seasonal and cyclical, meaning that you may have a stretch of several weeks where it's just spring and fall typically are more busy than summer and winter. And so, after Thanksgiving in the US through like the first couple weeks of January, there's just not a lot happening. And so you may have like a stretch in the fall where you're gone constantly week after week after week after week. And then you may have a stretch of like 6 weeks where you have nothing and you're home. That's another thing I tried to remind myself of a lot when I was home was that if I was working a traditional 9 to 5 job and I would leave the house, Monday through Friday and go to work and do that thing compared to I'm gone 70, 80, 90 nights a year. But when I'm home and I can work from home and I'm with my family. Which one am I home more on? Which one am I with my family more? Or even some of the different gigs that I'd be going to, the opportunity to take my family with me. Some of those, so if I'm speaking in somewhere warm and sunny and there's a beach, they want to tag along. And if I'm in North Dakota in December, I'm on my own, And so there's absolutely those trade-offs there. And so I don't know that there's necessarily like a right or wrong answer. I agree that the speakers that I know and they do 100 gigs, I'm sure we both know speakers who do 100 plus gigs and they're either divorced or their family life is a mess. And that's just not a trade-off I want to make. But at the same time, like there's a speaker friend of mine I'm thinking of, married, 4 kids, and does 100 gigs a year and is a great husband and is a great father and is a great human being, they make it work, so I don't know that it's necessarily like, again, a one size fits all, but there's absolutely a trade-off that the more you do and the more you're gone like that, there's comes a point where that starts to take a toll on you.
Yeah. Well, Jay Leno, I think he does like like 200 dates a year. And I'm thinking he and Mavis are apart more than they are together for sure. Because in order to do 200 dates, you're probably gone 300 days a year. You have to factor in getting there and getting back. And so I just think that that's crazy.
Well, it also kind of depends on like your season of life. So you mentioned like, if you have young kids, or if your kids are in like, involved in a lot of activities and that I'm going to book an event that happens 9 months from now. And there's a chance that there's going to be a recital or a play or a game that's going to fall on that date that is not even booked right now that I can't do anything about when that time comes,
Yeah.
So that's going to happen. You're going to miss things.
Yeah. Who was it? I don't know if it was Carrie Lawrence who said she went out into her calendar on all of the big parts, tried to get as much information in advance and just block those dates. And when you block a date for your family, I think there should be no blinking an eye if a gig comes.
Yeah.
But sorry.
It's a hard no. My youngest daughter was born December 21st, which was great because nobody's booking events December 21st.
That's perfect.
And so it worked out really, really well. But it is like it can be a trade-off at times. But I think you're exactly right that you have to, as a speaker, you and your spouse or significant other or kids or whatever, have to just draw a line in the sand and say, these are like the non-negotiables, right?
Yeah.
These are the things so like birthdays were a no-brainer for me of just like, I'm sorry, that's my, such and such daughter's birthday. I'm not going to miss it. Like it just doesn't work, but we can look at other dates or, whatever.
Now, maybe if you're in the first year and you're really trying to make the business work, or maybe I talk about that it takes about 3 years to make it work. When did you hit traction? You might make exceptions in those first 3 years that you might not make in year 10. We understand that.
It took me about 18 months to go from 0 gigs to being able to do it full time. Now, do it full time at that time meant like replacing like a $30,000 salary. So that's another part of just like
as a youth pastor, that was
So like there are speakers that or people who are interested in speaking that say, I have a solid 6-figure salary and I want to replace it. It's like you can. It's going to take a minute. It's like that's not I quit my job on Friday and Monday I have a full calendar. Like it just doesn't work like that because there's typically a longer sales cycle. And it just, again, like we were talking about, takes some momentum and takes some time to build that up. But yeah, I'm with you. I find that most speakers, it takes them anywhere from 2 to 3 years. Again, depending on how much they're trying to replace, how much flexibility they have with a job. We have a speaker that we work with who actually texted me on Monday at the time of this recording and said, hey man, we've been talking about it for a while and I finally quit my job. Well, he had a job where he went from, he was working a typical 40-hour week and then cut it down to part-time. And then they liked him so much that they're like, you travel and speak as much as you want. He was doing like 45 gigs a year. They were paying him for 10 hours a week. And finally, he's just like, this is silly to keep doing this job thing that I feel like they're paying me way more than for what I'm actually delivering. And I just want to do the speaking thing. And so for him, it's never like again, I'm just leaving on Friday and then Monday it all is going to magically work out. For most speakers, it is a gradual transition.
I really like
part-time with my job or whatever it is.
That strategy, that slow build strategy, and keeping kind of some employment, some sort of side hustle on the go while you're doing it is brilliant.
Right.
That's a great way to go, because when you've got a lot of financial stress involved, that you might be coming at each engagement from a place of desperation, and that's not the stance. We want the position to be standing tall in your fees, confident, and you know what? If this is a right fit, meaning you have my fee, then I'm excited about moving forward, not I'm going to do anything to make this gig work. What do you think about kind of speakers' positions?
I was thinking of something I wanted to run by you too, of especially like early on when a speaker's getting started, when they draw the line of, sure, most speakers, even professional speakers who've been doing it for decades, still are very strategic on doing some free gigs from time to time when it makes sense, when there's other value that they can receive beyond just, I got a check or I didn't get a check. But especially when you're making that transition, I know that one of the most difficult things for any speaker to do is to say no to an event. Because we just like it. Like, speaking's fun. It's really enjoyable. It's a rush. We get to help people. We get to make a difference. We talk about something we're passionate about. Like, it checks all of those boxes. But at the same time, we're running a business. And so you can't just say, like, if you're just doing everything out of the goodness of your heart, you're going to be broke. And that's not like, you cannot run a business that way. So I find that a lot of speakers are really, really good on the quote unquote art side. They're good speakers. They love what they do. They're passionate. They're great people. And they just suck on the business side. Like, they have a hard time saying no. They tend to take on more than they should. They're not good at knowing when to say no to an event or when to take on something free because it makes sense in other ways. What advice do you give to those speakers?
Well, I think that you build confidence as you go. And sometimes, I mean, that's what keeps me employed, is that I am able to give people the confidence that there will be more business after this business. Right. And what I actually find is one of the major problems. So we have a group called the Inner Circle Mastermind, and that mid-level speaker is so busy that they don't get time to really stop and work on their business, which means that they are going to be busy for years to come, not at the higher fees. What we want to do is reduce the number of gigs and raise the fees so that you're working less but earning more. And it really is kind of this, and this is a good segue for us to talk about running a business that's fear-based. First of all, it is a business.
Yep.
That is for sure. But one of my philosophies, and I believe it was Peter Legge, who's a multimillionaire, told me this, that decisions based in fear are typically wrong. And when you don't take a gig, or when you don't want to say no to taking a gig that you really shouldn't be taking, it's often based on fear that there won't be another one. Like, all actors are fearful that this will be their last job always, right? And so I think that not running your business on fear-based and really looking out and taking that time to really strategize where you're going and making sure that you have the confidence to know the value that you're bringing to the table, to be able to stand tall in your fees and be able to say no when it's not a good fit or they're not offering you up your full fee. That is the goal. And that is when you're actually running your business like a business.
Totally. Absolutely. And recognizing that, again, go back to like the seasons part or the cyclicalness of it, that there are going to be times where you may go a week and get 3 or 4 bookings that just come out of nowhere, and your outbound stuff or inbound stuff is really clicking and you're just landing gigs left and right. And then you may go a month without talking to anybody, and it's like, this is it. That was the last gig.
That's when the fear creeps in.
Right.
And that is the point when we have a wealthy speaker meditation that whenever somebody's going through that, I'm like 30 days of the meditation, 10 minutes a day every morning. And, it really helps you get I actually believe, tell me if this is true for you, that a huge part of any entrepreneur's journey is the mindset piece.
100%. I say that all the time. I've shared this little quick story a couple times before, but I remember a couple years ago, I was at an entrepreneur's breakfast here in Nashville, and it wasn't necessarily speakers, but just all types of entrepreneurs. And I met a guy there who had been kind of building up a side hustle, and he had just quit his job. This was his first week of going all in on his entrepreneurial endeavor. And I remember asking him, like, how do you feel, man? And I remember him saying, like, I'm excited, I'm scared, I'm anxious, I'm nervous, I'm worried, I'm the whole range of emotions. And I mean, at this point, I've been self-employed for I think 13 years. I remember telling him, I was like, that doesn't go away. Like, there are days where you're like, all right, business is great, this is fun. And days where you're like, well, that's it. I got to find a new job or find a real job or something.
Yeah, exactly.
You just feel like it's all imploding. And there are plenty of speakers, again, that we both know who are the outside looking in. You think they're at the top of their game. They get to charge.
They never have a worry, never have a problem.
Like, life is good for them. They get standing ovations left and right, but they still have the same doubts and fears and insecurities and worries that, like, what if the audience doesn't like me? What if I don't get any more gigs? What if the market's collapsing? What if I have to drop my fees? What if I have to start taking on these gigs that I don't want to take on? And like, every speaker, every entrepreneur still has those same doubts and fears. And so even though I'm not speaking as much now, I still have those insecurities and fears. They just look different, right? And I'm sure you do as well. Of like, am I going to get any more coaching clients? Is this still work? Does this still resonate? And so I don't know that ever fully goes away. It's just a matter of learning to kind of manage it and process it.
It really is. And I've been doing a really deep dive into mindset work lately in order to kind of go to the next level in my own business. And the work is fascinating. And I'm really loving it because I feel like it's such an integral part of going on to the next level. I used to believe, because I've never been like a speaker like you, I've always been behind the scenes as an agent, and kind of I'm looking at like this time in my career or my business is stepping into the spotlight a little bit more fully. Mm-hmm. And doing that means scaling as well, like going to this next level financially. I've always thought, I don't know, because I'm not going to speak and earn the big bucks that way. I don't know if I could ever do that, but I'm confident in it now, and I know everything that I need to do in order to get there. And the mental aspect of it is really, really important. It's absolutely essential. Getting there. Hey, so we were talking earlier about that whole fear idea. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when we were at the top of this call before we started recording, you and I said, let's talk about the idea of not fearing your competitors.
Yeah.
You and I may do some of the same work, and the way that I look at it, and honestly, Grant, I did not get here out of the chute. It took some of the mental work in order to really go, you know what? I'm going to be fearless about this business. And so I'm going to have people on the show who have programs for speakers. Why not, right? Mm-hmm. I'm serving my audience, and that's coming from a place, of servant, the servant leadership you want to be, but also of fearlessness. I think that the pie is huge, and we're just out there doing our thing. And if we can share clients, great. I actually looked at your client list, and there's hardly anybody that even crosses over. The pie is just so big.
Yeah. I find that those that are interested in speaking, it's very much like those that want to write a book. Like, it's a very high percentage of the world's population. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody wants to be a professional, world-class speaker, but a lot of people who are like, I have a cool story I'd like to share. Mm-hmm. And to them, it may be, I want to speak at a local Rotary Club, or I want to speak at a Sunday school class at church, or I want to speak at something at my company,
Right.
And that's what they're looking for. And that checks the box for them. But to your point, I think like the speaking industry is a very large industry, and there's a lot of us. Technically, you and I on paper are competitors. And so people may be like, wait, why are they on each other's show? What is this? But I know that there are people that are going to resonate with you that aren't going to resonate with me, and vice
Yeah.
versa. And there's going to be people that resonate with our competitors that aren't going to resonate with either of us. And that's fine, you know? And I think the other thing is, like we kind of touched on, is that the way everybody teaches it, or the model that we would teach, you know, you and I teach more on, I guess you could call it like a traditional speaking of, I want to get booked as a, you know, keynote presenter or a workshop, and I want to get paid for that. And yet we have friends and colleagues and competitors who teach more on like a speak to sell type of model. And both work. You know, that's not really the core of what we do. I don't know that it's the core of what you do, but there's certainly some speakers who do it, and that's fine. That totally works.
Yeah.
Some speak primarily as lead generation for consulting or coaching or some other part of their business on the back end, and that also works, you know? So it's not necessarily, again, a one size fits all.
I think the point is that speakers shouldn't fear their competitors.
Totally.
If you speak on leadership and you meet somebody else who speaks on leadership, you should be saying, "Oh, show me a little bit about your particular take on it, and I'll share with you what my version of leadership is all about, and let's see if we might have any synergy." And I have that. To me, somebody asked me earlier today, you know, should I join NSA, the National Speakers Association? And here in Canada, we have CAPS, which is the Canadian version of that. And I said, everybody I know, the community that we've built, and everybody I know has been through that association. So it's been tremendous for me. And when you meet other people and start to understand what their business model is and what yours is and how you might be able to help each other, I know a lot of people who are sharing a lot of leads. And so I really think that you need to look at everybody who is, and sometimes they may get the business because they're a better fit, and sometimes you make the business because you're a better fit, and that's just gonna chalk it up to, okay, next time, move on.
Right. Which I remember, like early on in my career, when I'd lose a booking to a competitor, how frustrated I would get initially, and then realize that event would not be booking that speaker for next year's event, most likely. And knowing that if I get to speak at it this year, they're probably not going to have me back for 3 or 4 or 5 years. And so I want to stay in connection with them. So I know that if I say, you're not going to have me back for a couple of years, let me introduce you to my friend Jane or Mike or Stu or John or whoever, and those speakers show up and do a great job, it makes me look good to that client, and they want to come back and work with me in the future. They want to know, who else do I recommend? And so I remember, like, my first full year of speaking, looking back and figuring out, okay, where did the business come from? How do we reverse engineer this? How do we book more of that? And I found that the majority of it came from other speakers. And I've heard different speakers say this before, but like, speakers get speakers business. And I think it was Michael Port who said that, like, speakers get speakers gigs. And so being able to connect with other speakers, knowing that not one speaker can speak 365 days a year. Like, it just doesn't work like that. So being able to refer business to one another makes a huge, huge difference.
Yeah. And I think when you are a part of a community that way, you're coming in off the island. You know, sometimes you're out there trying to do this business and it's a lonely business.
Yep.
You know, you're doing everything by yourself from the moment you get in the car and go to the airport. Yep. That's all lonely. Then you go and you get an hour of glory on the stage, and then you're alone again. And, you know, I didn't realize for a speaker how lonely it could really be to have that life of travel and everything. And so you definitely need to come in off the island and be a part of a group or the National Speakers Association or whatever it might be, in order to commune with others who understand your plight.
Because whenever you are trapped in an airport or a hotel, you're not going to get a lot of sympathy from other people who are going.
That's right.
What do you want me to feel bad that you're stuck having room service the whole time? Or?
Yeah, this is the gig, dude. You know, check in with your wife who's got the 3 kids running around, and there's, you know, the dog just threw up on the floor.
She's not going to give you any sympathy at all.
You know, that's the big equalizer, right? You go, you have your moment of glory and the standing ovation and everything, and then you hop in the car and you go home, and it's like, here, change this kid's diaper. Right. I gotta go.
Welcome back to real life.
Yeah, welcome back to reality. That's the great stabilizer, right?
Let me ask you this. What do you think is the difference between speakers that make it and speakers that don't?
And so one of the things that I might attribute it to is focus.
Mm-hmm.
And we could even go drill down deeper on that and talk about picking a lane.
Yeah.
I think that when you become known for one thing, it's very, very helpful to your cause. Maybe it's not essential, but it's very, very helpful to your cause. Let me give an example. I saw Mel Robbins speak at the Washington Convention maybe, I don't know, 5 years ago or something. And she was a good speaker, but nothing that she said was especially memorable. But then she came up with her idea about the 5-second rule.
Yep.
The idea behind if you wanted to do something, just come back in your head, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then go do it. And it was all about getting off the mark, taking action, getting over your fears, just going and doing something. And because she formulated that idea, everything changed for her. And had she been talking about the 5-second rule when I would have seen her speak the first time, I would have remembered that. 100%. It's a sticky idea. It's a good idea. And now she's building a massive platform on that, has gone on to do some really amazing things with Audible, and now has her own TV show, all because of that one idea. I'm not saying you have to have an idea that's that brilliant, because they come along once in a while. But I will say that becoming known for one thing is really, really helpful.
So it seems like she, like in that particular case, she found something that worked, that resonated with audiences, and really doubling down on that. And it's difficult because some of that's just kind of like live in the field feedback, because like when you're working on a talk or an idea, one of the things I tell our speakers is like, it's an educated guess until you get in front of an audience.
Yes.
I think this is funny. I think this will resonate. I think this makes sense, but I don't really know. And then you get up and you're in front of an audience, you're like, that worked, or that did not work like I thought.
Yeah.
Or it could work, but I need to tweak a couple of things here in order for it to resonate. And so, but once you're presenting something and you're like, wow, every time I speak, like this one thing I talk about really connects with an audience and it really resonates. And so just being self-aware on that and seeing what resonates and what event planners are looking for, what's resonating and clicking with an audience, and then leaning into that and doubling down on that and paying attention to that makes a big difference. And even just a focus in general of not trying to the old joke of who do you speak to? Well, who do you want me to speak to? Or what do you want me to speak about? I speak to humans. Like you just can't do that. You know, the best speakers that you've worked with, like I speak on a very specific topic to a very specific audience, and that's what I do.
Yeah, it's hard to boil the ocean, my friend Jen says. Do you listen to Frank Kern's podcast?
I have a couple times. Yeah.
Okay. So he talked about it from a marketing perspective, that if you have something that's working, triple down on that.
Yeah.
And so it kind of applies to speaking as well. If you've had 3 or 4 audiences in a row that really dig this, why aren't you developing something new? Triple down on that. But the same thing applies if you have tried some sort of marketing campaign, very effective, and triple down on that. Rather than trying to fix the campaign that didn't work. That's kind of like when you study the brain wants to go and fix it. It could be that male brains want to fix it more than female brains do. I don't know exactly if that's the case, but rather than trying to fix it, just look at what is working, focus on that, and keep doing that. Rinse and repeat.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's an exercise I walk students through sometimes, of just asking them, especially students they've done some speaking. It's not like they're starting completely from ground zero. They're just having a hard time getting traction, but just asking them and thinking through for any speaker of the past, couple years, what is the one event that stood out to you that like, I loved that event. The client was great to work with. The audience was great. The talk resonated. I got paid well. Like it just checked all of the boxes, because I promise you, like that's not an isolated event. There are more like that. So how do we find more like that? And what's the common thread there?
Triple down on that idea. So if it was a group of realtors, well, realtors are your people. So let's go find the associations that house all these people and then start doing them state by state by state. And I think that we're coming from the same place. Why don't we talk about a little bit about what it is that you do. You kind of have a school for speakers. Talk a little bit about that, and I can share what I've got going on. And I think we've covered a lot of good ground here.
This has been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed this. I'm glad. So what we were planning on doing beforehand was I was going to interview you for our podcast. You're going to interview me for your podcast. And then we were kicking around like, what if we just do one and just kill two birds with one stone? So this worked out really well. We may have to do a part 2 of this at some point. So yeah, so we the site that we run is called the Speaker Lab, where we teach speakers how to find and book speaking gigs. And so we have a couple different training programs and a couple different opportunities there. Our core product is called Booked and Paid to Speak, which walks through our system on how do you find and book speaking gigs. And so if people want to learn more about that, they can check out freespeakerworkshop.com. Freespeakerworkshop.com is the best place to go just to kind of get some information on that. But the podcast, your podcast, our podcast, there are plenty of good episodes between both of us that people can soak up as well.
And share the name of your podcast. I know your listeners are listening to it now, but let's make sure they get it.
Yeah, just the same name, the Speaker Lab Podcast. The Speaker Lab
Podcast. Okay, and my podcast is called the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. And we do programs. We have 3 buckets of speakers here. Emerging speakers, where we have courses for them to help them get started. It's called Accelerate. And then we also have, for intermediate speakers, we have an Inner Circle Mastermind program for people who want to scale. Mm-hmm. And then I do a lot of private coaching with people who have been around a while and are looking to reinvent or reignite their careers. And the book, the place to start with me is The Wealthy Speaker 2.0. That is the book that we have on the topic of getting paid to speak.
Which I've got that book somewhere. I'm looking here. I see it over there. I don't know if I can reach it. I'm going to try to reach it here. People can't see this. You and I are on video, but no one else can see this. But here, I've got it.
You got the up-to-date version. I thought maybe you'd have the older version.
This is the revised and updated edition.
I'm getting ready to write book number 5, which is going to be something like, So You Want to Get Paid to Speak. So it's like the prequel to The Wealthy Speaker 2.0 for people who are just toying with the idea.
Cool.
And they don't even know where to start to figure it out. So that's what I've been thinking about. I'm not 100% on that yet. But and as I'm writing that book, what's really funny this time around, I'll be thinking about a course that goes along with it, because that's what we do, right? We take our content and then we turn it into lots of other things. So we've got lots of courses and mini courses and things like that coming down the pike over here at speakerlauncher.com.
Awesome. Jane, this was so much fun.
So fun.
All right. So make sure everyone check out the Speaker Lab, check out the Wealthy Speaker. Speaker Launcher or the Wealthy Speaker?
Speakerlauncher.com is the best place to start. Thank you,
Speakerlauncher.com and the speakerlab.com. Check them both out. There's plenty of great resources to go around.
Thank you for your time on our show today. And for those of you who are listening over at iTunes, please make sure you subscribe and leave us a rating and a review. We would most appreciate that, so more and more people can learn about the Wealthy Speaker Podcast.
Absolutely. Yep. This was fun. Thanks, Jane.
All right. Thank you.
All right, there you go. Hope you enjoyed that conversation with Jane Atkinson. Once again, I'd encourage you to check out what she's up to over at speakerlauncher.com, and also check out her book, The Wealthy Speaker 2.0, and also check out her podcast as well. So a lot of great stuff from Jane. Again, she's been in the industry a long time, is a wealth of knowledge, and a lot to learn from her. So thanks for, again, being here. Appreciate it. Again, if you want our help helping you build and grow your speaking business, definitely stop by and apply for one of our breakthrough strategy sessions where we can talk through how you can work with us and how we can work with you, how we can work together to help you build and grow your speaking business. You can do that by going over to thespeakerlab.com/apply. Again, that is thespeakerlab.com/apply. That's it, my friends. Thanks for hanging out with us. We'll catch you next time. You're awesome.